It's week 12 in the NFL, and the first thing we do every week is take a look at the waiver wire with SI senior fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano. Fabs, teams are in one of three spots, right? They're either making the playoffs, fighting for that last playoff spot, or completely eliminated. So we're going to do a little different here. Look a couple weeks ahead to help solidify some of these fantasy rosters. So for quarterbacks, who do you want on your team?
Right. So Taysom Hill, if he's not eligible at tight end, is probably still out there in a lot of leagues. And he was very good from a fantasy perspective against Atlanta, giving you over 24 fantasy points. Hey, we love running quarterbacks. He's got the Broncos next, and then Atlanta again in week 13. So you could pick him up at the quarterback position. Tight end eligibility, TBD moving forward, folks. Phillip Rivers had a nice game against the Packers, over 21 fantasy points. He's got Tennessee coming up in week 12. He had nearly 19 fantasy points against them back in week 10. So Rivers is on the radar. So is Kirk Cousins, who lost to my beloved Dallas Cowboys. How did that happen? But he had a good game, 3 touchdowns, nearly 23 fantasy points. He's got Carolina coming up in week 12. A couple of other quarterbacks that you could pick up. Tua Tagovailoa got benched, but he's probably going to be the starter next week. And he's got the Jets, and we know how Jets, well, they're just not that good. Daniel Jones is coming off a bye. He's got Cincinnati, and then Alex Smith, who didn't do much for the football team against Cincinnati. Well, he's got the Cowboys coming up on Thanksgiving Day.
All right, let's move over to the running back position. I always feel like this time of year, someone ends up emerging that helps vault people to the fantasy championship. We might not have that guy yet, but it's going to be coming in these. I just know it's coming up in some of these weeks that we have on the schedule. But who are the running backs that you're looking at for heading into week 12?
Oh, are you mentioning maybe J.K. Dobbins, who is my stash and cash player in the preseason? That wasn't actually. Dobbins played 40 snaps. He had 17 touches, scored over 18 fantasy points this week. Please let this be the passing of the torch in Baltimore. He's the best running back they have by a mile. They do. The Ravens have a tough matchup upcoming on Thanksgiving against the Steelers, but Dobbins needs to be owned across the board. Same thing with Wayne Gallman. He's coming off a bye, but he had 4 games with a touchdown, 4 straight, and Devonta Freeman is on injured reserve. Gallman and the Giants have the Bengals coming up. That's a good matchup, so pick up Wayne Gallman. James White is back on the fantasy radar. Played 39 snaps, had 11 touches, 83 yards, and over 14 points against Houston. Rex Burkhead had a very bad injury in the game, likely out for the season, which means James White is back in play. Remember, Damian Harris and Sony Michel, they don't really catch the ball. They're very one-dimensional, so James White could see some more opportunities. Salvon Ahmed, I love to say that name. He once again led all Dolphins running backs in snaps and touches, and he's the guy in Miami until Myles Gaskin comes back, and we're not sure when that's going to be. Could be this week. Maybe it will be a little bit longer. And then finally, Carlos Hyde. I think Chris Carson's coming back this week, but regardless, it's time to handcuff those top running backs. If Hyde is out there and you have Chris Carson, go get him.
All right, let's shift over to wide receiver. What pass catchers are you looking to add this week?
We talked about Michael Pittman last week, and again, he had a very good game against Green Bay. 66-yard and a touchdown, scored double-digit fantasy points, 2 straight games. And the first game was against Tennessee, where he had over 19 points. And guess what, Bill? He's got Tennessee once again, so Pittman should be added. And what about Cole Beasley? Hey, Buffalo was on a bye. That doesn't mean you can't pick these guys up. He had nearly 21 fantasy points in the game before the bye. John Brown got hurt in that game. He has scored 12 or more fantasy points in 6 of his last 9. They've got the Chargers coming up next. Cole Beasley needs to be added across the board. A few other players to add at wide receiver. Jalen Reagor has got the Seahawks upcoming. Great matchup. Allen Lazard didn't really do much for the Packers, but you want shares of wide receivers catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. And then Rashad Perriman. Yeah, I'm going there. It's a Jet. He had a touchdown against the Chargers. He's had over 30 combined fantasy points in his last 2 games. So suddenly, Rashad Perriman is on the fantasy football radar.
All right, the last position we're going to go over is tight ends. Anyone there catch your eye?
Dalton Schultz. What did we say last week? Hey, I know he had a bye, but coming off that bye, he's the best tight end to pick up. And what did he do? Scored a touchdown against the Vikings, had over 12 fantasy points. They have the football team on Thanksgiving Day, so Schultz is a nice add. Jordan Reed as well. San Francisco coming off a bye. They have the Rams coming up. He had 6 targets in that game before the bye. Now, Philadelphia's tight end position might become crowded, right? Zach Ertz is eligible to return, but Richard Rodgers had another nice game, 48 yards and a touchdown. He is now giving you 10-plus points in 3 of his last 4 games. But if Ertz comes back, then Richard Rodgers will stay on the waiver wire. And then in deeper leagues, Jordan Akins had a pretty good game for the Texans. They had the Lions on Thanksgiving. And I said I was going to do this last week, Bill, and I'm good to my word. Tyler Bass, the kicker for the Buffalo Bills, the last time he played, 54 yards, 55 yards, 58 yards, made them all, 18 points, 14-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. He's more reliable than Lamar Jackson at this point. Wow. They've got the Chargers coming up. Hey, man, kickers are people too. Points are points, my man.
Take it wherever you can get it, especially with the fantasy regular season coming to an end. Now, I mentioned that we're starting off the week with the waiver wire. Fabs is also going to have his stardom situm, his PPR rankings. You can find it all by becoming a member of SI Fantasy Plus. Go to si.com/fantasy and sign up for just $14.99 a month.